Welcome to Skip the Queue, a podcast for people working in or working with visitor attractions. I'm your host, Kelly Molson. Each episode, I speak with industry experts from the attractions world. In today's episode, I speak with Sarah Bagg from ReWork Consulting. We're talking about the procurement process and asking, is it broken? Sarah shares her top tips for both attractions and suppliers entering into a new process. And we also discuss improving long-standing partnerships. If you like what you hear, you can subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, and all the usual channels by searching Skip the Queue. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Kelly.
Welcome to Skip the Queue. It's lovely to have you here.
I know. Thank you for having me.
We're going to start with some icebreakers. So I would like to know, I like this one. What strange food pairings do you love that nobody else understands?
Oh, that's a good one. I don't know. It's probably not a food pairing anymore. We had this conversation the other day about how you used to live off a budget when you were at uni and the strangest things that you used to have. And I remember when I was really skint, I used to have a bowl of couscous, because you don't even need to cook that, with ketchup and Worcester sauce.
One, that is disgusting.
It's disgusting.
But two, I'm laughing because mine also involves like a grain and ketchup as well.
It's like, surely there's five a day in there somewhere.
Yeah, ketchup's good for you. Of course it is.
Worcester sauce is bound to be.
Absolutely.
A bit of carbs.
How gross. So mine is really similar, actually. So it was, the bags of white rice that you can get that you put in the microwave.
Mm-hmm.
So one of them, whack it in the microwave, a tin of tuna, and ketchup.
Yeah.
I mean,
ketchup makes everything better.
Protein goals.
Your head is in that space where this requires washing up either. Bonus.
Yeah, good. What about, just while we're on the topic of things that we eat, what about cold baked beans straight out of the tin?
Oh,
yes, one. Isn't it?
Yeah. Once when I was again at uni, we went to Prague on a trip and we went on a coach. So it was like a marathon journey. And loads of us were eating cold baked beans.
So delicious. It's the best thing ever. My daughter loves baked beans. Like, she's a baked bean fiend. But that is the first thing that, as soon as that tin's opened, I'm getting a couple of spoons of those down. Right, good.
Yeah.
Learned a lot about each other there, didn't we?
We're on the same wavelength.
Okay. Attractions related. What are you most likely to buy when you exit through the gift shop? I love this question.
Oh, I am a massive fan of postcards, not because I send them anymore, because it feels a bit like, and I mainly go sort of, I would say my choice of visitor attraction would be like a gallery immersive type of attraction. And it always, stays on my fridge, and it's not just something, maybe you can frame it and make it into a piece of artwork rather than some tat that's just plastic. And yeah.
That's nice. Thought you were going to start dissing rubbers then. My rubber collection.
Big fan of fridge magnets too, but they always have to be like of something that looks nice and tangible.
Yeah, like a model of that. If you went to like a historic house, a model of the house or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Postcards. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That is quite a nice one, isn't it? Okay, last one. What one thing would you make a law that isn't one already?
Well, technically it is. It's about finding people though. My biggest bugbear about anyone in life is dropping litter. I can't stand it. It makes me feel I turn into a big old moany person. I figure it's a good thing to moan about. It would be a way of being able to find people and fine them on the spot for dropping litter.
See, that is a thing though, isn't it? But who does there's not,
who can find them?
Who does it? Who does the fining? Yeah, that's a good one. Okay. Good.
Because there's no point in having a law if you can't implement the law. So, yeah. There's signs all over the Brighton seafront saying you'll get fined if you drop litter. But who's the litter patrol person that's going up and down?
There's a job there, isn't there? There's a job there. Good. Okay. Thank you very much. What is your unpopular opinion?
So this might split the room slightly, but I guess that's the point of a unpopular opinion. It'd probably be unpopular for most marketing professionals and web designers. So watch out, Kelly. Absolutely hate pop-ups on websites.
Oh, that's
Can't
okay.
stand them.
I'm with you.
I absolutely hate them. They're like the worst invention. I don't understand why they're still on websites. Because they like, I'm just browsing. I'm like literally been on somebody's site for like barely 15 seconds, and you're asking me whether I want to like subscribe to your newsletter. I'm like, I don't even know anything about your company yet. Why are you asking me to subscribe to your website? Yeah.
So there is a good use case for them. I hear where you're going. They are annoying, but there is a good use case for them. But I think it's about timing, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
It's about time and place again. So not when someone's just come on and browsing, like, but if they're in your blog, right, and they're invested in some of the things that you're talking about, then absolutely that's the time to hit them with a little pop-up.
Definitely. You're right. It's about timing rather than enough time to blink.
Yeah.
There should be some way of, it's either certain pages or the time that you've been on.
What are really annoying are the pop-up adverts that you get on like local newspaper websites. Have you ever like gone on? There must be like a Brighton local news website.
Yeah, the Argos.
Oh my god, they just drive me insane. Like to the point where you just can't read. You can't read the article.
No.
So I'm not okay with those. There you go. Well, let's see. Listeners, let us know. Pop-ups, no pop-ups. Is Sarah's opinion that unpopular? We shall see. Tell me a little bit about your background, Sarah. What you have done previously and where that brings you to now.
So I have spent a ridiculous amount of years working in the leisure and hospitality and attractions industry. I don't say attractions because it hasn't just been attractions. But I guess before my management career, which started probably about when I was 23, I'm 46 now, keep on saying 45, keep forgetting I've added another year. I probably spent all my working life in leisure, hospitality, and attractions from the age of 15. I was working in Green Leisure, which is a theme park in Somerset, where I grew up, from working in the Swan Theatre in High Wycombe, where I went to uni, and then part-time roles in Australia when I was travelling in the Sydney Maritime Museum. I managed a hostel over there. So I've always been in customer facing leisure operation roles. And then when I came back to the UK after travelling, I moved straight to London. No offence to Somerset, I still love my home county, but I needed bright lights and excitement of London. I guess you could say I honed my management craft and skills in the pub business. So as a really young manager, I started working at O'Neill's, which is a whole, I could talk about that for about an hour. We haven't got that time, but kind of by accident. And I remember a guy saying to me, look, if you're going to be here, I know you this is a part-time gig, but you may as well get trained in management while you're here. And O'Neill's, for people that don't know it, and the overseas listeners, it's owned by a company called Mitchells and Butler. So it's a big corporation. And they used to have a very good management training program, which was almost like fast track on learning on the job, but also lots of assessments. And I think 4 months after I started, I was managing the pub that I took a part-time job in. And it's a massive learning curve, for managing stock, cash, people, public drinking, massive issue. Obviously, profit, events, you name it, you can learn it in the hospitality and pub business. And then after a few years working there, I went to Vinopolis. Again, people might not know it, but it's a wine tasting and events company in London Bridge, London, 3.5 acre site. And I was head of operations there. And I looked after about 120 staff, my responsibility. And that led to me getting a role at Chelsea Football Club. So for about 5.5 years, managed the stadium tours and the museum there, as well as 2 CapEx museum redevelopment projects. So yeah, that was, when did I leave Chelsea? 2013, something like that. So I spent all of that time in sort of London and that area, and then went to sort of the supplier side. So I went to work for the visitor attraction company first, They were opening a series of attractions throughout the country, and I went in as a contractor, head of ops for them. And then I went to the technical supplier side and worked for a UK ticketing provider. And initially I was doing some business consultancy for them. And then the owner offered me a full-time role that was sort of sales, marketing, customer success. And I was there for about 7.5 years, and then got promoted to a directorship, where I helped the owner in a more strategic direction of the company in terms of development roadmap and recruitment strategies, etc. And that was up until April last year, actually a year.
Yeah. Oh, it's a year. It's your year's birthday. Oh, that's exciting. Yeah. So Sarah and I, we met actually at your time at Tour. I think that's how we got talking, didn't we? Because we had a client that was using the system, actually. I think that's how the conversation started. But you have branched out on your own as an independent consultant now.
I have.
And that's, you doing that has kind of formed the topic of this conversation, because it's kind of what you help your client base with. So tell us a little bit. The company's called ReWork. Tell us a little bit about what it is and who you work for.
Well, yeah. So maybe a little bit different to some consultancies that support attractions. I support attractions or leisure operators and tech suppliers. With basically the main aim is to increase revenue, grow their businesses. That's the end goal. But for attractions or leisure operators, it could be procuring new solutions and finding the right partnership with whatever tech suppliers the requirements for. But it also might be helping them with their current partnership and improving it. Because, my experience, the easy bit is the procurement. It's maintaining the partnership for the years to come, where there's obviously lots of areas for improvement, and many of the reasons why people jump ship deciding to go and find another supplier is because the relationship's gone down the Swanee. And then with suppliers, I've been helping them with their sales and marketing strategy, either new suppliers that are coming into this market and want to understand a visitor attractions better and the marketplace and where it stands, or where there's improvements to be made. I think lots of suppliers, everyone's guilty of it. You get in your own headspace, don't you, of you keep on doing sales demos, you keep on doing processes, and just take somebody that has an external view. As a consultant, you're in a perfect position because you get to see loads of loads of suppliers presenting and doing demonstrations and responding to RFIs and RFPs. So actually going in there and reviewing that process for them to improve their sales conversions is part of my offering.
So we're going to talk about procurement today, and it is a word that I think probably fills suppliers and attractions with dread.
Yeah.
It's a daunting process. It can be time consuming. It's kind of a necessary evil, isn't it? Like, I'm a really realistic supplier in the sense that there's a lot of agencies out there. Well, there's a lot of agencies out there, and there's a lot of people that will advise you to don't go through procurement process. Don't do it. You shouldn't pitch for stuff. And on one hand, I totally and utterly agree, because it is painful, and some of the things that make it painful we'll talk about today. But unfortunately it's a necessary evil in the sectors that we work in. It's the process that is followed, and so you kind of have to play the game. But the procurement process has to be run in the right way, and I think that is why I believe that procurement process has broken down quite drastically over the last God knows how many years.
And I think there's when some suppliers say, I don't get involved in public procurement, for example, because of how, it's so labor intensive. I was involved in one who will remain nameless not so long ago, and they were using the same kind of procurement processes as when I was involved with a supplier, maybe like, I don't know, must be like 10 years ago. Even references to things like fax machines. It's like, God, like no one's updating this process from the government side of it, things. Obviously, that's where they're getting their forms. But on the very flip side of that, you might have a private attraction leisure operator that I've seen procurement done on like one sheet of A4. You know, that's their basis of spending tens of thousands of pounds on a solution.
Yeah, and neither makes sense, right? So we have to find what we have to find a process that works, and so I feel we have to find a process that works and the whole industry adopts that process. That's what I think would be. Anyway, I want to ask you, what are the biggest challenges for an attraction when it comes to the procurement process?
Well, definitely I don't know about top, but the most pressing one which you get from whatever organization takes it on is time. You know, it's very rare that you would ever find somebody that's like, right, I'm going to procure a new solution and I'm going to recruit a new member of staff to run that whole process for me. Like, that just doesn't happen. And then there's obviously downsides to that too, because that person doesn't understand the organization. And yet that sometimes there's a perception that as soon as the solution goes live, that's it. No one, it's fine. We don't need to put any time aside now. Maybe we've got an administrator or somebody that does administrating for the system, putting new tickets on or creating new events or retail items. But the emphasis on time suddenly goes, which I think is all wrong, because the partnership should start from the moment somebody says hello all the way through the life cycle of that.
Yeah.
That agreement.
So you mean that relationship isn't managed past the point of the solution being implemented, that then correct, the relationship isn't managed in the correct way.
And I know the term partnership gets floated about so much, and some suppliers, it might be ticketing, but it might be something else entirely. Some do turn up and action things that make partnerships great. Others just use that name as a selling point. But I think the key thing is that the person that's procuring, the organization that's procuring the solution and working with that supplier, and the supplier have a 50-50 ratio responsibility for making that partnership work. And I don't know if that is anywhere evidence. I don't see any evidence of that within our sector. And I guess that's where I feel that I've got a good position to see both sides, because I'm working with the suppliers to hopefully raise the standards, and I'm working with a leisure operation and attractions to raise the standards. So hopefully, although I'm only one person right now, you know, in time that will have some impact.
Yeah. Okay. So biggest challenges for attractions, we talked about, you mentioned time, resource, because lack of time, and you know, you potentially need someone to run this process for you that you don't have. And then the challenge of how to get the most out of that relationship once the solution has been implemented. It doesn't stop there. What about, because you sit very much in between the attractions and the suppliers, what do you think are the biggest challenges when it comes to suppliers about the procurement process?
Well, I would say that they both have similar stresses. And the second one I was going to say, apart from time, is knowledge. There is maybe a lack of awareness about how much the process of procurement matters to the end result, as in who you're going to choose. And that's about, you know, if a consultant's on board, you're expecting them to have market knowledge. So obviously awareness of the actual sector, but also market knowledge of what technology providers are out there and which are suited to that particular client, but also what process works the best to get the best result. And I don't think that emphasis is strong enough. And I think that also impacts the suppliers. So if they don't have, most of the time, they don't have any say, apart from maybe how they turn up to a demo, about the process at all. And it totally impacts them and how they can perform.
Yeah, I totally agree. a lot of the procurement processes that you are part of are for ticketing and for systems and or platforms maybe. And I kind of come at it, we're slightly different in that, you know, yes, it's a digital offering that we have, but it's a website, so it's more of a, it's not like a plug and play kind of thing. But I think the biggest challenge that I find is lack of conversation early. So give you an example, a tender comes in, a brief comes over, looks really exciting, looks absolutely up our street. I read the brief. There's no opportunity for me to have a conversation with them about the brief. I can send questions, I can email questions over. So, you know, there is a dialogue, but it's not a way to, it's not even about building a relationship. If I'm honest, it's about that two-way street. Like, can you work? Should you be finding out early enough if you gel? You know, is there a relationship there that could be developed? Are we right for you? Are you right for us? Kind of thing. That's I think the thing that I find the most frustrating about the process is that complete lack of conversation at the start of it.
I think that opens up massive issues because there's, I wrote a blog post, an article recently about, I can't even say the word, ambiguity. It's really a hard word to say, because when you're relying on the written word, that you read into things, whereas actually if you just get on a call and say, right, these suppliers, you don't need to name names who ask what questions, but these are the answers to all of the questions. And somebody then might say to you, oh, that's great, because that makes that much clearer. Can I ask another question? And it's just there, you know, you've clarified everything.
Exactly.
Really well, whereas you wouldn't be able to do that so easily, back and forth.
Yeah, exactly that point. And then the other one is open tenders. So I've talked a lot about this actually. So Sophie Ballinger from Eureka came on, I think last season actually, to season 3, and we had a good talk about it. So Eureka are a client of ours. That's public knowledge. When we first started working with them, we were lucky enough to have eyes on a tender that had been sent out, and it was a public tender. They put it out they did send it to a few people, but it, you know, anyone could find this tender and potentially put in a proposal for it. And that's what happened. So they had 40 tenders come back in, you know, 40 proposals for their brief. This is a weird one in that we were one of those 40. We'd been up to meet Eureka. We'd been up to see them and ask questions. They were really kind. They gave us, they gave everybody that wanted time with them time, whether that was on the phone or in person. So it was a really good process. We got shortlisted and we won that tender, right? So in one hand, I can't knock that process because we got the opportunity to work with an incredible client that we still work with today. They're amazing. However, I questioned Sophie and said, would you do this massive open tender again? Because surely, respectfully, you have to read 40 briefs, 40 responses that come back, right, and evaluate them. That's a shit load of work.
Yeah.
It'd be better to do your research first, pick like 3 or 4 that you think are a really good fit on paper for you, do a little bit of groundwork, and then just send it to those.
Yeah.
Well, she was really torn because she was like, yes, on one hand, that would have been sensible, but then they wouldn't have found us through that process. So it's, and that's why I kind of raise it as I'm really torn about this, because we wouldn't have got that opportunity if it hadn't been an open tender. But also, does it work? I don't know if it works.
No, I know. And like, I honestly believe that if you rush the process, even though you say you short time, you're only going to cause yourself more grief, and you're investing in, you know, in a system that isn't like a couple of £100, you know, and you really want to be with them. I know technology is moving faster, and I could argue to the fact that these old legacy systems now, where they had the, you know, we've been working with this client for 15, 20 years. Well, have you been doing a really great job, or is it just too much of a pain to change because it is so ingrained in your organization? Whereas obviously all the cloud-based SaaS solutions are much easier to swap and change over. Anyway, that's a side topic. I think that if people can do a step-by-step process, whether you call it RFI or RFP, whatever. Somebody said to me last year, Sarah, I just don't have time to sit in. These suppliers want me to sit in on a demo for like 2.5 hours. And I was like, yeah, that's quite reasonable. If you can't put time aside, and that means changing how your organization is for weeks or months, whatever, to give you some support, or you bring in somebody that's going to help you through that process, you do need to put in time. Otherwise, you're going to be making the wrong decision.
Yeah, I totally agree. That 2.5 hours seems quite insignificant in the grand scheme of things, that you're going to spend like, potentially hundreds of thousands of pounds on this system over the years. That 2.5 hours, you kind of really need to know if it will do what it says it does for you.
So like, for people that don't really understand the market and how massive it is, even though whenever I talk to people about in our industry and I tell them what ReWork does, they're like, wow, that's a niche, isn't it? And I'm like, yeah, it's amazing how we've got a niche of ticketing. And when I say ticketing, this obviously gets confusing sometimes, because ticketing does encompass membership. I call it retail, catering, because some organizations that are smaller want a system that they might call it a ticketing and CRM system, but it does all, everything. If you went up a scale, and they might be looking at a best of breed solution, which is, got higher functionality in ticketing, but they don't have catering or, retail, etc. And they might integrate to another best of breed solution. But there's the market review I did earlier on this year for a global entertainment organization had 25 ticketing suppliers to the visitor attractions sector. So with somebody that has no knowledge, how do you work out where that 24 are going to be shortlisted to the first stage, let alone second stage? And you might be missing out on an amazing supplier if you don't.
Because you don't know how to evaluate from between them. I hadn't thought about that. That's a really hugely daunting process, and probably why people should use a consultant, Sarah. But how do you see? We talked a bit about that partnership piece. How do you evaluate what a good partnership is?
I briefly touched on it, about the fact that people think about partnerships as the ongoing process, but it starts at the very, very point of contact. So whether that's me as a consultant doing a Q&A with some suppliers, I'm acting on behalf of that client at the end of the day. So it's how professional I am and whether I'm asking the right questions, but also a mutual level of respect and understanding between the client and the supplier. It's not, oh, you're a supplier. It's, we turn up together, we're in this together. We as attractions operators or leisure operators understand some of the stresses that suppliers have to go through. And suppliers also understand the stresses and the challenges that the operator has to go through. Because without being open and honest about your businesses, how are you going to be able to work together?
Yeah, it's a good point, isn't it? You have to understand the intricacies of each other's businesses. And we probably don't do that enough, actually. I think there's been times in the past where we haven't asked enough of the right questions. So, being brutally honest, I'm sure there's plenty of suppliers out there that have done exactly the same as us, and we haven't understood the intricacies as well as we should have. So we do make sure that's a focus now, because if we don't, we can't build the solution that works for them and works for the level of understanding they have of certain technologies, or just the level of resource that they have. Like this thing that we're going to build for them, do they actually have the internal capability to work with it? That's a question you need to ask. So, but what I guess we don't often do is flip that on its head. So we as suppliers probably don't go, well, look, this is our team, this is our capabilities. We also have X amount of suppliers, and this is how our, we probably don't go into the level of detail that we need to about how we operate, so that the attractions can understand maybe some of our limitations as well, right?
Exactly. And I think once a solution goes live, if you're talking at that kind of handover period between implementing and then going live, suppliers also need to discuss and make it, it's vitally important for them to make this partnership work. If they don't, they'll be losing that contract. So how can you put something in place? And it's not just saying, we'll do account meetings whenever you feel like it. What actual credentials can you put there, evaluation processes to say whether the partnership is working? And I know that suppliers issue SLAs, but then their SLAs, like, is the system down? Those kind of things. And that's not really about the partnership. That's about the solution actually working, like you're being paid, on a service contract for it to work.
So you mentioned SLAs, I'm laughing because one of my other bugbears is actually sometimes it's not just a part. So for instance, we work with attractions. We have a partnership with the attraction, but also we need a partnership with whatever ticketing solution they have, right? Because we're controlling the website that their ticketing solution is attached to, and to a certain extent, vice versa if it's API driven. So the ticket, we'll have our SLAs. Ticketing provider will have their SLAs. We don't know what they mean. We get given. I can. Again, maybe no names, but there's, we get given this is it's with support and it's an SLA level of XYP, and we're like, great, what does that mean? Are you gonna? When do we get a reply then? Because the client's coming to us, there's an issue. Are we going to get a reply in an hour, or is that a 16-hour? I don't know. So it's like define what those SLAs are and actually share them with everybody involved.
Everyone. Yeah, exactly. So if you took the example of like. Say it wasn't all-in-one ticketing solution and it was best of breed, and there was a ticketing supplier, a retail supplier, and an F&B supplier, you would want to know that all of those three know how they all operate.
Yes.
And arguably, one of the account meetings that you have them.
I totally agree. This came up on a panel discussion at the Ticketing Professionals Conference a few weeks ago, didn't it? About who's in control of that user journey when it comes to ticketing and websites. And that was one thing that we kept saying is actually, it's not about them and us. We all need to work together for the best solution for the client. And that does mean all speaking and all having those open conversations about stuff. Stuff goes wrong. It's always going to go wrong. But, it's not about who's at fault here. It's about how do we rectify it and how do we make it not happen again. And you can't do that unless you've got all the right people in the room at the same time.
And it's, I go back to my days at O'Neill's, we used to have a mystery shopper scheme, and it used to put everyone on edge. Like, is that the person that's a mystery shopper? And there's like a snapshot of your business, wasn't it? It's like one visit every quarter, and then suddenly you're given like this result, and it's like, well, that's not really fair because, most of the time it's being run really well. Why have I got, 80% and not 95 or whatever? But if there was something in place that you could see over a period of time, not like, the ticketing supplier isn't doing great this week. Every quarter you could sit down and say, here's the benchmarks. What are we doing well? What is supply doing well? What is the attraction doing well? Are they getting the responses back to me quickly enough? If they, if a supplier's got an issue, if an attraction's got an issue with the system and they've reported it to support, for example, but they haven't been clear about what the issue is, then it causes frustration for the supplier because it's like emails back and forth or help desk portals, with massive long lists of questions. So it does take the attraction also to turn up and give the right information for that supplier to investigate the issue properly.
Yes, that is a very good point, actually. And that I know can be a challenge because attractions teams are often quite small. Sometimes ticketing can sit with marketing. Sometimes ticketing can sit with visitor experience, operations. And those teams are pulled here, there, and everywhere. So, that's a very good point, is that there's an element of more triaging needs to be done internally before it goes out to the ticketing or the web agency. And that comes down to good account management, right? Yeah,
100%. And how you, obviously there's used to be a high turnover of staff. Now at the moment, the recruitment is really hard for most attractions out there. How do you, with your supplier, record issues, report back issues to management, make sure the member of staff that's actually using the system on the front desk is accountable to X, Y, and Z, that actually manages the partnership? So the structure within your organization as an attraction really matters in terms of how the partnership works. Because if you've got loads of casual staff on a Saturday and Sunday, and the manager that manages the partnership doesn't work Saturday and Sunday, something needs to be in place for that communication to be clear and for the supplier to get the right information and therefore investigate and get back to the person, and the organization as quickly as possible. So it is like, I just think it's a 50-50 level of responsibility. We've always thought this kind of, it feels like suppliers are down here somewhere and as the client, you're up here, just because one's paying for the other.
No, I get that, and I've felt that in some circumstances. It's good to highlight that. Okay, few more questions. What would be your 2 top tips for attractions when it comes to the procurement process?
Definitely would be to, if you want to get advice, and this should be for any consultant out there too, is that even if you don't think you need, because you've got great team to manage the procurement process, get some external advice early, even if it's just like pay for one day's consultancy. In the grand scheme of things, that's going to be like a tiny pinprick in the big budget. And it might allow you to go, if you started the project, say, for instance, in 2022 and thought, I need a new system, but I can't afford it till 2023, have the conversation with the consultant early. They should be able to give you an indication of timelines. So therefore, then you can work back and know when you've got to start the process. Because no one everyone always underestimates how quickly time goes, holiday, absence, then you've got to rely on getting all the suppliers ducks in a row in terms of organizing demos and presentations. And then people within your organization, who is going to help you, because you can't do it all on your own. Through the procurement process, you're going to be sick, on holiday, you've got a million other projects to go. There needs to be more than one person, and ideally it would be a project team, people different departments, but somebody that's accountable to take that support and to take it forwards.
Great tips. Same question for suppliers. What would be your 2 top tips for suppliers going through the process?
I think in terms of procurement, listen to the brief and respond to the brief. Don't just put out some blanket template response. We increase sales by X to X, or so that when the references come up, you can go to that client and say, they're saying that they've helped you increase sales by X. And they're like, yeah, they did. The previous system was shocking and our relationship is really great now. Because anyone can say airy fairy sales waffle, as I call it. Give the potential client some facts where you've actually helped. But even if you can got 2 examples, that's better than just coming up with sales waffle, in my opinion. And I would say get somebody to review your processes. When I started working for Tor in that consultancy period, I reviewed all of the tender processes that were going on in the organization. And in the end, I started working, so I had to put my words into practice. But I think getting somebody to look at it from an outside perspective, sitting in on some demonstrations and seeing it from a new perspective always helps. And I'd probably say that, to be honest with you, for any organization. Occasionally it sometimes takes a new person starting, doesn't it, to go, why are we doing it this way? Or
because we've always done it that way. Can't we do it a different way? Good advice. I like that. And you probably, to be fair, you probably answered my last question, is why is it important to work with a consultant? you answered an element of that briefly in that, get an outside pair of hands, get an outside view, on what you're doing. Also, I guess, you've got knowledge of systems that they may not be aware of. So you're keeping up to date with the current trends and the current things that are happening within the industry. What else would you say was a reason for working with a consultant?
Many people will think I can't afford a consultant. So they see it as a cost to the project. Whereas I know people will say, well, of course you're going to say this because you're a consultant, but I've always thought consultancy and expert impartial advice is a cost saving, because it's filling the gaps that you don't have. Like, even that global entertainment company didn't have ticketing expertise to be able to do a market review. They identified that in their business. So actually, if they had moved forwards without putting that step and getting that independent person involved, they wouldn't have been able to move forwards with clarity and reassurance that they're making the right decision.
Yes. Or
those decisions end up with lengthy contract terms, unpicking, a mess.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure everyone at home is nodding, going, oh God, I've been there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, they make the decision that actually they don't have the time, capacity, or the budget to go ahead with the project anyway. Yeah. So there's that to consider too, isn't there?
Yeah.
Offer what we call a discovery session, discovery workshop, which could be, it's exactly what you were saying about, getting someone in just to do a day or two's consultancy with you to give you an overview of where you're at and what actually would be the right steps to move forward with. And that's kind of what we do as well. And it's a really good way of evaluating, actually, can you do this project at this point?
Yeah.
Do you need to do it now? Do you need to put this on hold for 6 months? Do you need an X person in? Do you need this person to be in the role before you go ahead with this project? So that's invaluable.
Or do you even need to do it at all? Because I think sometimes there's a tendency to have blinkers on, not because anyone's fault, but because you've just been dealing with the day-to-day grind. And actually, has anyone tried to make this partnership work? I know it should be suppliers. So this is a shout out to all suppliers there. Don't sit back on your laurels with contracts. I heard somebody say a while ago, somebody that I met at a conference, they were like, oh, it's great. I haven't had to deal with my supplier for weeks, months now or something, ages. And I was like, is that a good thing? Is that a good thing that you haven't heard from your ticketing partner for such a long time? Yes, it means the system's not down or whatever, but surely there should be more engagement. Are you getting the most out of the system to engage with your customers and make you more money?
Yeah. That to me says that isn't a healthy relationship, though, because surely because if you're hearing from that sense that I get from that is that you're hearing from them because stuff was going wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing from them, so nothing's going wrong, but that's still not right.
No.
You should be trying to engage and improve and
Yeah. And I think this sort of sits outside procurement, but one thing leads to another, is that my biggest piece of advice, and I said this at the Ticketing Business Forum the other week when I was asked, that suppliers need to, and this whether it's ticketing or whatever, is to really decide which part of the market they are targeting, and as I call it, pick a lane, because I honestly don't believe you're trying to be everything to everyone is going to service the industry well. Your current clients will soon be left behind because they're not important enough anymore because another group is. Do you really have a big enough development team, to service all these requirements from all stretches of our sector? It doesn't, and it doesn't help when you're trying to shortlist because, this supplier says they're everything to everyone. Like, how does that help anyone try and push, if you want to, I don't know, develop your membership area, is that important to that supplier in terms of their roadmap?
Yeah, so niche within a niche, Sarah. That's what they say, isn't it? Niche within the niche.
Well, there's enough suppliers out there, 24 plus, that actually everyone could have a niche and everyone could be doing it really well, and there won't be any need for all of that, would there?
Good advice. And we'd only need to send out RFPs to maybe 4 of them.
Yeah.
All 24.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks, Sarah. I could talk about this topic all day long. I think, as you're well aware, I've got lots to add to this conversation. But I would like to know what book you'd like to share with our listeners.
For those of you that haven't probably seen my LinkedIn, I'm also a life coach, and it feeds quite a lot into consulting about how I ask my clients questions. And I love this book. It's all about time. It's called 4,000 Weeks, and it's about the average we have this time on the planet.
Wow.
And how we should use the time. And what I love about it is it's like lots of time sort of management books always like they make you try and let's eke out every minute and productivity. And
this harder.
I feel I'm like exhausted listening to them. Whereas this really takes quite a reflective view of like what's important to you and take a step back. And I think we can all learn massive lessons from that in this ever fast-paced world that we live in. So 4,000 Weeks would be my recommendation.
Great book. I like that. That's not been on the podcast either. I think I might go and check that out, Sarah, because I'm not going to lie. Hectic is the word that I would describe the beginning of this year. Hectic. And I could do with taking a bit of a step back and evaluating how I spend a lot of my time. So I'll add that to my list. Listeners, if you want to win or be in with the chance of winning a copy of that book, if you head over to our Twitter account and you retweet this podcast announcement with the words, I want Sarah's book, then you might just win it. Who knows? You might get lucky. So it's been lovely to chat. Thank you.
Lovely to have me on.
Sure, I will see you at an industry event very soon, because we always bump into each other and it's always a pleasure. But thanks for coming on and sharing about the procurement process. We will link out to all of Sarah's contact details and her website in the show notes. So if you do want to get in touch for a chat, book that day of consultancy, go ahead and do it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Skip the Queue. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find us. And remember to follow us on Twitter for your chance to win the books that have been mentioned. Skip the Queue is brought to you by Rubber Cheese, a digital agency that builds remarkable systems and websites for attractions that helps them increase their visitor numbers. You can find show notes and transcriptions from this episode and more over on our website, rubbercheese.com/podcast.